This black judge faces the fight of her life when she stands against a corrupt system. When Judge Vanessa Thornton rules against a powerful prosecutor, she becomes the target of a ruthless smear campaign designed to destroy her career. As threats escalate, her son is kidnapped, forcing her into a high-stakes battle where justice is not just a principle shattered, but and nowhere left to turn. She uncovers a network of corruption that reaches the highest levels of power. Time is running out, and if she doesn't act fast, she won't just lose her career, but she'll lose everything. Judge Vanessa Thornton adjusted her glasses and scanned the courtroom. The defendant, a young black boy no older than 17, sat with his hands clenched together. The prosecution delivered their final statement with cold precision. Your Honor, this is a clear case of armed robbery. The victim identified him. The evidence is overwhelming. The state recommends the maximum sentence. Vanessa pressed her fingers together. The case had holes. Fingerprints were inconclusive. The security footage was grainy, and the only eyewitness had changed their story. The boy had no prior record. He wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the hardened criminal the prosecution painted him to be. She exhaled slowly before speaking. However, after reviewing all available evidence, I find that mitigating factors call for a reduced sentence. This ruling takes into account the discrepancies in witness testimony and the defendant's age. He will serve a structured rehabilitation program rather than full incarceration. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The prosecutor's jaw twitched, his knuckles whitened, and banged the gavel. Court adjourned. As soon as she stepped into her chambers, her assistant, Maya, rushed in. Judge Thornton, Doc Callahan wants a word. He's waiting outside. Vanessa's lips pressed into a firm line. Let him in. District Attorney Bryce Callahan walked in with the smoothness of a man who always got his way. Vanessa, his smile didn't send the wrong message. She folded her arms. The law is meant to serve justice, not just punishment. That boy had no fair chance. The system failed him long before he entered my courtroom. Callahan's smile faltered. Careful, Judge. The city is watching. Mistakes can be costly. Vanessa's expression didn't change. Is that a warning? Callahan chuckled, raising his hand. Have a good evening, Your Honor. The moment the door shut behind him, Maya spoke up. That sounded like a threat. Vanessa didn't respond. She had dealt with pressure before, but something about Callahan's tone unsettled her. A week later, an envelope landed on her desk. No return address. Inside was a printed letter. Judge Thornton, your decisions raise concerns. The fair system requires balance, and you tip the scales. The public deserves better. The words sat heavy in her hands. This wasn't an angry citizen's complaint. This was targeted. The next morning, she found another envelope. Reputation is everything. Don't force us to question yours. Vanessa showed the letters to Maya, who frowned. We need to report this. Not yet. Vanessa shook where this goes. But it didn't stop at letters. A file she had just placed on her desk the night before had vanished. When she requested a copy, a court clerk informed her that her ruling on the case had been challenged, something that rarely happened so soon after a decision. Colleagues who once greeted her warmly now avoided eye contact. Conversations ended the moment an email arrived from Monica Evans, an investigative journalist. Judge Thornton, I have come across information that suggests a coordinated effort to discredit minority judges. You may already be a target. If you're willing to talk, I can help expose what's happening. I have sources, but I need confirmation. Meet me. Safe location. Your call. Vanessa sat back, the words blurring together. This was bigger than a grudge from Callahan, but this was different. This was calculated. Vanessa placed the email aside, rubbing her temples. The tension in her office thickened when Maya stepped in, holding her phone up. You need to see this. On the screen, a news anchor recited a carefully worded segment. A video played in the corner, footage of Vanessa during a past trial. The clip showed her ruling on a case, cutting out critical moments, making it appear as though she had ignored key evidence. Public concern rises as scrutiny over Judge Thornton's record deepens. Judicial board officials have announced an inquiry into possible misconduct. Vanessa's breath steadied. This was planned. Maya nodded. And it's working. The board is opening an investigation. Vanessa grabbed a pen, flipping through her case records. And it wasn't just about her. Derek Wells, her clerk, stepped in without knocking. Judge, Callahan's been covering up case dismissals. White defendants walk free while black defendants are sentenced harder than ever. She put down her pen. You have proof? I found inconsistencies in sealed records. Someone's altering files. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Other black judges were pushed out. This isn't random. That same morning, an envelope sat on her desk. Inside, a photo of her son, Xavier, with a red X across his face. Maya paled. This is serious. Vanessa stared at the photo, her grip tightening. Call Monica. We fight this. Monica responded within the hour. Others are linked to a judicial fund backed by corporate powerhouses. They're silencing judges who don't fall in line. Then Vanessa's car brakes failed. She reacted just in time, skidding to a stop before slamming into traffic. Hands shaking, she sat motionless, processing what just happened. 2 days later, Derek burst into her office. Black defendants' case files are being altered to remove exonerating evidence. That night, her home was invaded. Nothing stolen. No damage. But on her kitchen counter sat a single note. Stop digging, Judge. She held the paper between her fingers, expression unreadable. They wanted her to walk away. She wasn't going anywhere. Vanessa set the note down, her pulse steady as she dialed Monica. Her voice rushed. I have something big. Someone inside Callahan's office is willing to talk. Vanessa leaned forward. Who? A former prosecutor, Liam Prescott. He was part of it, but says he didn't know how deep it ran until it was too late. Monica's voice lowered. He's scared, Vanessa. Says he has evidence but needs protection. Vanessa's grip tightened around the phone. We arranged to meet tomorrow. I'll call you as soon as I have something solid. The call ended, leaving Vanessa staring at the note left in her kitchen. If Callahan and his allies were willing to alter legal records, threaten her son, and sabotage her cases, they wouldn't let a defector like Liam walk away. The next evening, Vanessa checked her phone every few minutes, waiting for Monica's call. Voice was a whisper. Then it came. Vanessa, I found something. This goes beyond the courts. Private companies. Campaign donors. Judges being forced out. The line cut off. Vanessa's chest tightened. She redialed. No answer. The next morning, Monica Evans was dead. The official report labeled it a suicide. Vanessa refused to believe it. She wasn't alone. Derek slammed a folder onto her desk, his face pale. His apartment's been ransacked. Liam Prescott is gone. No trace of him anywhere. Vanessa flipped open the folder. Inside were court records Derek had managed to pull, cases that had been altered, dismissed, or conveniently buried. Every single one led back to Callahan's office. She had enough to push back. But the walls were closing in. The Judicial Board called an emergency session, citing concerns over judicial conduct. Judge Henry Colleagues Wallace, avoided her. One of the longest-serving justices, stopped her in the hallway. Vanessa, step down before it's too late. She met his gaze, searching for any sign of regret in his warning. You think that'll make them stop? His silence was answer enough. That night, she stood over Xavier's bed, watching him sleep. The thought crossed her mind, leave the city, start over further. Maya called. You need to see this, her assistant said, voice sharp. At the courthouse, a single document sat on her desk. Her resignation letter. Dated. Signed. Except she had never touched it. Vanessa picked it up, her jaw tightening. They want me gone. Maya swallowed hard. Are you? I'm making a statement. Vanessa placed the forged document back on the desk and turned to her assistant. The next morning, in front of reporters, Vanessa Thornton stood her ground. I will not resign. I will not be intimidated. The corruption in our system is deep, and I refuse to be silent. The moment she stepped away from the podium, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She answered. A mechanical voice whispered through the receiver. Sign the resignation, and he lives. She sprinted to her office, grabbing her keys. Xavier wasn't at school. His phone went straight to voicemail. Maya watched, panic spreading across her face. What's happening? Vanessa didn't stop moving. They took my son. A knock at the door. She spun around. Callahan. He stepped inside, looking casual, almost amused. Terrible situation, Vanessa. Kidnappings are unpredictable. Where is he? Her nails dug into her smirk palm. Didn't waver. That depends. You have something I need, your cooperation. His gaze flickered to the resignation letter still on her desk. Sign it. She locked eyes with him. And then what? You'll let Xavier walk free? Callahan sighed as if he were growing tired of the conversation. Bow out gracefully, Vanessa. You're already finished. Her phone buzzed. Xavier, hands bound. Message. A dark room in the background. Vanessa's chest constricted, but she kept her voice steady. I want proof of life. Callahan smiled. Clever. He tapped his phone, and another picture appeared, Xavier looking dazed but unharmed. You have until midnight. Callahan took a step back. If I don't see your announcement by then. Well, I'm sure you can imagine for only a moment before grabbing her coat. Derek met her at the door. I found something, he said, voice tight. The location they're keeping Xavier, it's an abandoned warehouse near the docks. Vanessa didn't hesitate. She drove. The warehouse loomed ahead, an empty husk of metal and broken windows. She slipped inside, moving cautiously. Then hands grabbed her. A rope tightened around her wrist. Of a single light revealed Callahan's men, and Xavier, slumped against a chair. One of the men stepped forward, a vial in his hand. Overdose, he said casually. Painless. Vanessa thrashed against the restraints. You don't have to do this. Callahan's voice echoed from behind. We do. Then sirens. Loud and close. The men froze. Vanessa's phone, still hidden in her jacket pocket, vibrated once. The recordings went public. A single text from Derek. The FBI is coming. The warehouse doors burst open. Agents swarmed in. Callahan's men scattered. Vanessa broke free, rushing to Xavier, who was groggy but conscious. Mom? He croaked. She cupped his face. I've got you. Across the warehouse, Callahan stood frozen as the agents closed in. Vanessa met his eyes. This time, he wasn't smiling. The cuffs clicked around his wrist. Back to Xavier, he was pressing her forehead to his. It's over, she whispered. Vanessa held Xavier close, his breathing uneven against her shoulder. The flashing lights outside the warehouse illuminated the chaos as FBI agents moved swiftly, rounding up Callahan's men. Officers shouted commands, their voices sharp and direct. Callahan stood motionless as cuffs were secured around once his wrist. Symbol of untouchable power, now hung loose on his shoulders. He looked at Vanessa, his expression unreadable, but for the first time, there was no arrogance behind his eyes. The lead agent, a woman with cropped black hair, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of judicial corruption. Callahan exhaled through his nose, his hands flexing slightly. This isn't over. Vanessa met his gaze, her voice steady. Yes, it is. As he was led away, the weight of the past months settled into her bones. The threats, the intimidation, the fear of losing her son. There was no time. It had all led to any of it yet. She turned to Derek, who had arrived moments earlier. You sent the recording? Derek nodded. It's everywhere. News outlets, social media, the Department of Justice. The whole country is watching. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Messages flooded in from colleagues, journalists, even strangers who had seen the leaked video. Across the country, outrage ignited like dry into not just Callahan, but the entire judicial system. A medic stepped forward. Ma'am, we need to check your son. Xavier let go of her just enough to allow the medic to examine him. He was exhausted, shaken, but alive. That was enough for now. By morning, headlines dominated every major judicial corruption. Doc Callahan arrested in sweeping federal probe. Justice system under fire as cover-up unraveled. Vanessa sat in a small waiting room at the hospital while Xavier rested. Maya walked in, holding a tablet. It's everywhere. They're calling for a full-scale investigation into judicial racism. Cases are being reopened. Judges and prosecutors are lawyering up.
A scandal this
Vanessa rubbed her temples. Maya sat beside her. You made them listen. The Judicial Board called an emergency meeting. This time, Vanessa sat on the other side of the long mahogany table, staring down the very people who had once prepared to remove her. Judge Henry Wallace cleared his throat. Judge Thornton, after reviewing the facts, the board finds no misconduct. The fabricated evidence, the forged resignation letter, it's clear you were targeted. Vanessa didn't react. She had already known the truth, but hearing it from them, it felt like something shifting into place. The chairwoman, a woman in her 60s with a sharp, assessing gaze, leaned forward. And you're free to return to your position. I think I speak for the board when I say your courage changed the course of this institution. Courage. That wasn't the word she would have chosen. She had been tired, angry, desperate, but she had never stopped. Vanessa stood. Then let's make sure real change happens. Days passed in a blur of headlines and legal motions. Prosecutors who had worked under Callahan's grind now faced scrutiny. Cases that had been unjustly decided were pulled back into review. 1 week later, Vanessa walked into her courtroom for the first time since it all began. The room felt different. Not because the walls had changed, but because she had. She took her seat at the bench, straightened her robe, and nodded at the bailiff. Black teenagers stood at the defendant's table, accused of burglary. The evidence was thin, too thin. Vanessa met his eyes, recognizing the quiet tension in his stance. She had seen it before. This time, she wouldn't let the system swallow him whole. The gavel struck once. Let's begin.